Welcome to the Time Management Strategies Academic Success Workshop. My name is Andrew Garda. I am one of the student success coaches here at WCU's Learning Assistance and Resource Center. And today we're going to talk about time management, how you can use it in your everyday life, especially in an online course setting. So we are part of the Learning Assistance and Resource Center. So right now we are converting all of our academic success workshops online. So once you are finished with this one, you can go about looking at a few of our other ones, such as our digital learning success, our self-care workshop, and our finals prep workshop. We also do offer academic support via online success coaching meetings. So if you'd like to meet with me or another one of my staff members, that's absolutely possible. You can just go about emailing that email towards the right. We also do online tutoring via Zoom with our tutors that we have usually on campus during the school year, as well as our Smart Thinking service, which I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation. And you can also look at the frequently asked questions about our health notice update. That'll tell you everything going on during this time, how a lot of the services on campus have moved online and how we continue to support our students. So for this workshop, some of the goals will be students are going to be able to manage their time and prioritize their responsibilities daily. We're going to learn how to avoid and/or combat procrastination by planning accordingly. We'll learn that procrastination is somewhat difficult to avoid, so sometimes it's just going to be inevitable, and how do we go about fighting it? And lastly, we're going to create some comprehensive work and home weekly schedules that'll help you get through this semester and beyond. So we're going to look at where our free time is going. We're going to talk about priorities, procrastination, what's the deal with all that, as well as organizing your individual schedules. So with free time, it's important to understand how we're using it. So if you take a look at this picture on the left, this student, he is trying to go about managing his social time with his nights out, getting coffee with friends, having fun. I think he's playing cricket, as well as his study time and going to his classes. He actually does a really great job by color coding his schedule. So if you take a look, we can say maybe the orange is for studying, the social time is the pink, the blue is his nights out. Definitely goes about keeping him very organized. So when we're talking about where our free time goes, that's some examples of where it can go about heading towards, but depending on what your life looks like, you might have to go about putting in time for cooking, putting in time for childcare, things of that nature. So it's just important to understand where that all goes. Now, when evaluating our time, it's important to ask ourselves how we use it and how much time is cutting into our day. So with that, we're going to also think about what time wasters can be. When thinking about those, it could be simple things such as when you go about taking a shower, maybe you take a little bit too long. It becomes a time waster at that point. Don't need too long to go about doing something like that. But some days maybe we just spend 30 minutes in there. For some days, maybe that can be a form of self-care, which we'll touch upon later, but at other times, we need to go about prioritizing our main tasks at hand. And then never forget to schedule that personal time. Use it wisely and really do take care of yourself. If you need that 30-minute shower, you're going to know that you need it. So with priorities and procrastination, it's a good idea to think about what our daily priorities would be. Are they coming first, or are we pushing them off for other things that might come throughout the day? So some important daily priorities that we can think of are eating, sleeping, hygiene, things of that nature. And then it goes and drifts on to during the school year, we got to think about our study time, going to classes, things of that nature. Are they coming first, or are we pushing them off for more hobby-like things? So me, for example, I like video games. For me, that's an act of self-care, but sometimes I indulge in it a bit too much, and it comes before things like eating, things like my classwork, and it can make my time management a little bit difficult. So with procrastination, some common causes for it could be such as a lack of motivation. I know especially during this time, our days really do blur together. It can be really hard to get up in the morning and know that, I got to go to school now. And I got to do it through a webcam. It might be a little bit different from what you're used to, but there are definitely ways to combat that. With perfectionism, you might think this task, this assignment needs to be done perfectly. That's not always going to be the case. with testing anxiety. Everybody feels it to some degree, and it really can make us push things off just because we're afraid of what can come. But when managing your time effectively, you'll be able to handle that test and any other tasks at hand when they come through. With the inability to handle a task, think about why you might not feel that you're able to. It could be something like test anxiety. You just don't feel you're up for it right now. It definitely ties into the other common causes of procrastination. With difficulty getting started, sometimes it really is difficult. You look at it and it just looks like an absolute mountain of work to do. But once you start chipping away and you get into a routine, it's going to definitely be a lot easier to do. And other times you might just be confused, and that just means you got to ask for help. And lastly, your tasks are going to be there regardless of when you start. If you start early, it's still going to be there, but you can get finished with it early. If you don't start till the last minute, it's still going to be there, and it's going to look a lot more like a mountain than it did before. So ways to combat procrastination is by planning accordingly. So if you go about completing your work in stages, so this can be similar to our friend who was blocking out time to go about studying, doing his assignments, having those times in our calendars, in our planners, to go about taking a few minutes each day to study for that exam, start working on that PowerPoint, and then also monitoring our progress. How are we doing? Are we meeting our goals for each day, or do we maybe need to add a little bit more time onto the next few days to keep up with the task at hand? Making honest and reasonable decisions about your work. One of the biggest parts about time management is really just knowing yourself. Can you actually get that done in 20 minutes? That's something to definitely reflect on. If you need more time, you just need to give yourself more time. And there's nothing wrong about giving yourself too much time, because if you finish early, you got time for other stuff now. Reduce distractions. So try to find a quiet place within your house where you might be free of distractions. I know this can be difficult for some. I myself, I live with 2 other people, so that can be difficult sometimes. But I make a nice little tidy space in my bedroom, and that tends to work out well when I have to do quiet work. And really keeping your priorities first, so making sure you're getting done with those assignments when they need to be done and not pushing them off to the end, making sure you're getting sleep, making sure that you're eating, things of that nature. And definitely take some short breaks. If you go on for several hours cramming in something for, say, your psychology exam, it's just not going to go well. Frankly, you're going to need to look at those psychology notes a little bit harder because you are stressing yourself out. So taking a short break to go stretch, to go for a little walk, to give yourself a little snack can make a huge difference. So when it comes to reducing distractions, it's a good idea to find a good place to study where you're not easily distracted. So like I said, finding that tidy space where it's really free of distractions. Maybe you have a little desk in your room, maybe a little table. Something like that would be a good spot. Kind of replicating a study space that you might find off campus as well. Would be good when you're not able to go off campus like in these times. Don't put temptation in your path. Just turn your phone off, no social media, put it on Do Not Disturb. If you are using a computer for your work, there are even some apps where you can go about blocking out the internet for a certain period of time if you're just using, say, Microsoft Word to type something out and you don't need internet. Those can be pretty helpful. And it's a good idea to think about music or no music. Sometimes people will go about putting some music on and it'll go about helping them, and it calms them down. It gets them in like a Zen zone. But for other people, it might be distracting. So it's a good idea to figure out what music works for you, or is music good at all. If you happen to have something like Spotify as your streaming service, there are some pre-generated study genres and study playlists. You can go about checking those out. They seem to be pretty popular and work for a lot of people. If they don't work for you, just experiment, see if there is something that will help out. Oh, and lastly, FaceTime a friend or a classmate for help if you need it. Just because we are indoors and going online doesn't mean we can't communicate with other people. With this, make sure to keep it on task, though. This can sometimes go bridge into things that are a little bit off topic. Can be good for self-care, but just don't overload yourself on it. And then what's the best way for you to study? Like I mentioned before, the best way to work with time management is to know yourself. So when it comes to increasing motivation, it's a good idea to feel good about your accomplishments. So that could be a way in which you set up, say, a reward system. Say you make yourself a to-do list. Every time you cross something off, what is your little reward going to be? If you have a day-long to-do list, you can even put in, say, I watch a single clip from my favorite YouTuber after I finish something. It's a good way to incorporate breaks from the beginning, as well as rewarding yourself. Oops. And making sure that you, sorry about that. It's a good way to reward yourself and making sure that you stay on task, and that you know some nice rewards are going to come up. Telling somebody else about your study goals or teaching somebody what you're studying is going to be highly effective. The first portion of that, it's going to be great for accountability. If you are living with somebody else at the time, it's a good idea to go about talking to them about it. Say, hey, in my management class right now, I'm learning about different types of organizations. It's really cool. You can have an organization that has a flat structure, narrow structure, tall structure, things of that nature. Definitely can help you learn things better if you're able to explain it to somebody else who might not be studying it. And then you could also just go about saying, hey, I have this list of things to do. Can you go about checking in on me every other hour or so, just to see if I'm doing it? That accountability will really help me with my success. Forming a study group with Zoom can do a similar thing. So with that, you'll be able to bounce ideas off of other classmates. My personal favorite way of this is if you're in a writing group, have everybody get on Zoom and just turn your mics off and only turn them on if you need some help and need to ask for a question. You have that accountability, and you know if you're talking, the only reason to be doing it is to get some academic assistance. So definitely get enough sleep. So about 7 to 8 hours is the recommended amount. Think about sleep as food for the brain. If your body's hungry, you're not going to be functioning that well. So if your brain is hungry, you're not going to be functioning that well either. Find some different ways to reduce stress. That's going to look different for each person. For myself, it'd be I love cooking and I love going for walks. For somebody else, they might like more intense exercise. They might like doing something artsy. I think now's a great time to go about figuring out what that might be, and when to go about doing that. It's a good idea if you can find something short to do during a break. It'll go about being a nice little reward for you as well. And then you can email your teachers, professors, counselors, coaches. If you have any challenges or questions, they're all here to help. Even though we might have moved to an online setting, people are still there to support you. So when it comes to organizing your schedule, think about adding your main necessities and priorities first. So we talked about things like eating, sleeping. Your assignments are going to be really important. With your assignments, it's good to reflect them from your syllabi. So once you get a syllabus, think about taking every single assignment that you see and just putting it in at the beginning of the year. If you haven't done that yet and say it's the middle of the year, it's still a good idea to do that. You'll know right from the get-go what your important dates are. And if you see, hey, I got an exam on Friday, you know on Monday that's a good time to really start kicking into high gear with your studying. If you're involved in any student organizations, it's a good idea to put those on as well. Campus involvement is going to be a great opportunity to meet people, especially if they're in your major, and it can build a great support network. So if you want to go about building up that Zoom group, this is a way to go about finding some people for it. Other things that you want to go about scheduling is if you happen to have a job, that's going to be important. If you happen to have dependents that you take care of, making sure that there's at least some open, flexible time in there for those dependents, and anything else that might be important to you. So when it comes to how you schedule, you can think about using a calendar, a journal, or a online calendar. There are a few other ways to do it, but I personally recommend using whatever works best for you. If you are more of a tactile person, then a physical calendar or journal might be helpful. A nice thing about a journal or a planner is that you can take it around with you in your backpack if you are traveling. Once things go back to an on-campus session. Or if you use the calendar, it might have to go about staying wherever you do your main studying. So if you go about leaving it, you might not have it everywhere. So there's going to be some benefits and drawbacks to each of them. I recommend for an online calendar using your Outlook calendar. The reason is because you can sync it to your email. You can send yourself reminder notifications, reminder emails. And if you download the Outlook app on your phone, you can have a sync to that as well. And it can be incredibly helpful. So when scheduling, it's important to just go about putting those necessities in first, then blocking out your personal time, and then lastly, putting in the activities and obligations. If you remember our friend at the very beginning, we were looking at his schedule. This one on the right looks pretty similar. You have things color-coded. You're making sure to put some time in to eat. And really just keeping things organized however you'd like it. I think this one on the right is also a great example. You can see it's going to look different each day, and then your week generally will become a routine. I like how Sunday's off of it because Sundays can go about being time for yourself. You can put study time in accordingly, or it can just be that day of rest if you need it. You're really going to appreciate that structure and procrastinate less when you have a schedule to hold you accountable. So lastly, it's in my head is not going to be working in college. You need to go about having some sort of tactile piece in front of you in order to keep yourself on track, especially when you're in an online setting. These days really can blur together if you're in the same space and not walking around to different locations. So the distributed study method can be really helpful when planning out study time. You can think of it in the sense of doing a daily review for each class and having about 15 to 20 minutes of that. So say you're taking 5 classes, you can go about splitting that up as like an hour and a half each day just for a generalized study. You could go about doing a weekly review. So try to do 45 minutes to 1 hour for each subject as well, or a major review. So those are going to be however many days in a row before an exam. If it happens to be like a lighter quiz, maybe you want to do it 1 to 2 days, but say it's an exam that's worth a heavier chunk of your grade, you're going to want to plan that out for a few more days than that. Having that for 1 to 2 hours. And this distributed study method is just to kind of have you chunk everything out, absorb the information throughout the week, and not give yourself an overload. When you give yourself an overload, like studying for 5 to 6 hours the day before an exam, and that's really all you're doing, that cramming is not going to get all the information in. You're not going to memorize things as well, and your exams will probably not have as good of those results. The 3-to-1 rule is 3 hours per 1 session of class each week. Then tutoring and smart thinking is always going to be available as well. So for tutoring, you can go about setting it up with the Learning Assistance Resource Center. For online sessions, we are transitioning for them to be on Zoom now. And our smart thinking has always been available 24/7. And that'll just be with a third-party tutor, but they can still be really helpful, and those will work on a drop-in method, whereas our other tutoring might not always work on that. So lastly, keep trying things new until you find really what works for you. As I said a few times before, the best way to understand time management is to understand how you work with it. So what if you don't have enough time? So with that, you're going to want to learn to say no. You're going to really want to learn to prioritize things. So say this really cool opportunity comes up to hang out with your friends, and maybe it's not going to be something you're able to do again for a little bit later. If you happen to have some exams coming up, just remember those are going to be the priority. You're investing into your education, and you want to succeed with it. It's going to help you with your latter years of school, as well as when you eventually go into your career path. So learning to say no is going to be really important so that you don't overwhelm yourself. So when you say that you can't pour from an empty cup, like this art towards the left, learning when you start saying no, you're going to have a little bit more water. You're going to be able to pour more into your priorities, but if you pour everything out, there's really nothing you can attribute to it, and you're going to stress yourself out. Having a to-do list is going to be really important. This is really helpful if you're doing things on a weekly or daily basis. Good for that routine setting. Helps you just consistently know what you have on it. You can check things off. You can add little bullets under it. So you have a larger project, you could do like little to-do lists for each little bullet. So you can get smaller and smaller as things go on. Some people really like to chunk things out like that. So ultimately, if you do a to-do list, it's also going to look different depending on the person. Definitely read ahead when you can. If you feel like you're excelling in one portion of a course, sometimes you might have troubles later on. So it's going to be important that if you have this extra time, read ahead a little bit, just to make sure that you have a good comprehensive understanding of what's coming up next in the course. And if you have any questions, you'll be ready to send them to your professor a bit more preemptively. It's going to be really important with your success. And set some goals. So similar to prioritizing, you're going to want to determine what goals are really important to you. You can set them on a semesterly basis, a yearly basis, as small as a weekly basis, or even as big as an entirety of college basis. And then under those goals, you're going to want to figure out ways to reach them. When setting up a goal, you're going to want to make sure that it is specific, measurable, attainable. It's a realistic goal, meaning that it's something that you will actually be able to do, and that it's going to be time-based. So going on to the time-based, you have those different ways of doing it. The specific, you know exactly what it's going to be. Sorry about that. I did jump a little bit ahead of myself. Measurable, so you know that you will be able to do it and in what exact time span. You know how to chunk it out. And then attainable, it's going to be something that you can go about doing with what you have right now. And then be aware of your most productive times of the day. Say right after you have lunch, you just get like a bolt of energy, and you think that you can go about maximizing your schoolwork. Do it then. That's going to be really important to know that this is that time of the day where you're going to get the most work done, and it's going to be good to capitalize on that. And lastly, sleep. Make sure to get those 7 to 8 hours. It's going to be really critical for not just your academics, but your overall health. Sleep is connected to pretty much everything you do, so those 7 to 8 hours are critical. Know your professors. So it's always good to keep a syllabi handy, whether that be in an online setting or you have them all printed out. If you do have it in an online setting, you can go about, say, saving them in different, saving them as PDFs and keeping them in a folder so they're easily reachable. This will be a good idea, especially as you are opening up so many different tabs to keep up with online classes. Just having one go-to place for all of them ready is going to be perfect. Scheduling a Zoom meeting with your professors and emailing them with questions when you have them. Depending on how your professor is going to operate, this might actually be how they do their office hours as well. So it's good to understand from your syllabus, especially any updated ones if your course transitions online, that you can go about kind of getting almost that face-to-face type interaction if that's what you need. Knowing their expectations, especially when it comes to grading and late assignments. So if professors give a grading rubric, it's important to go about looking at that as you're going through an assignment to try to understand that, how you're going to reach each of those different pieces of your grade. And then with late assignments, especially when we're talking about time management, we all make mistakes. So it's good to understand if you make a mistake, is there ways to go about making up for it. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Your professors are here to support you in your academic success. So reach out to them if you ever need help with any of your coursework. And just some more general tips. Allow for flexibility. So we're talking about making this schedule, getting into routine. When we talk about taking breaks, this is really important because it reduces your stress with things. Sometimes this routine can become a little bit too stressful, and maybe you'll have to go about changing it. So you go about setting a schedule and setting a routine. Allow for flexibility if you might want to go about changing it later down the line. Because once you get into a routine, you might be a bit more motivated by it, but then things can still run stale. So just be ready that sometimes things might run stale and you might need to make a little bit of a change, and there's nothing wrong with it. Keep trying new things until you find what works for you. Everybody is completely different when it comes to time management. That's kind of been the phrase of the day, is you're going to be different from everybody else. Here are just some general tips, and just figure out how you best manage your own time. Keep your work with you. So this is going to be really important. If you have, if you tend to focus more on, say, digital learning, you keep all your work on a laptop, you're probably always going to have it with you. In that sense, make sure that you have it organized. So say you find some extra time in your day and you have a psych exam later that week, just know exactly where you have to go to start looking a little bit more over those psych notes. If you keep things physically, try to keep a little bit of tabs in a binder or have individual folders. That organization is going to make it quicker for you as you keep your physical work with you as well. And lastly, take care of yourself. Self-care is not selfish. So make sure to incorporate those breaks, incorporate those times to participate in your activities. But just don't let them go too overboard, as we were talking about before. You gotta keep your priorities, but self-care is going to be one of those priorities. So to review some of the helpful resources that we talked about before, we have our Smart Thinking online tutors. So they are a third-party tutor service. You can drop in with them. You can go about scheduling meetings ahead of time. They're going to be helpful for a lot of different courses. They work with like math, science courses, some languages, nursing. And they even have study tables on there as well. So say you don't really want to go talk face-to-face with somebody online, you feeling a little bit more introverted that day, they do have just some helpful study tables and even some interactive ones that could be really helpful with certain courses. When it comes to those tutors, whether Smart Thinking or our tutors with the LARC, make sure to come prepared with any questions that you have. Walking in blind is not going to be that helpful because if you expect people to just kind of talk to you with things, it's not going to work as well. You want to kind of make it somewhat of a conversation about your learning. Your professors are going to be helpful if you have any questions about the individual class, and your classmates are going to be great for accountability, as well as also helping you out on a peer level. Some different app and review sites. You might use something like Quizlet. That one's always been really popular. It's a great resource if you need to go about making flashcards, but maybe you don't have the paper out to do them physically. Maybe you don't like them physically. You don't like writing. And that'll also be a good study site if you want to go about collaborating on some study materials with some classmates. Online textbook resources. So say you use a textbook that's published by McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill, for certain different courses, they'll have some resources similar to what Smart Thinking has, where you can go do some interactive examples online. So definitely just check usually be in the front page of your textbook, they'll tell you if there's anything online. And then look over your notes from class. As any questions come up, make sure to bounce them off of the different people that I already mentioned. Towards the right, that is our writing center. So they are still operating online. So you can go have your papers reviewed. You can go about doing a FaceTime-like session as well. Purdue OWL is a great online writing lab. Helps you with all the different types of formats, and they lay it out so it's really easy to understand, especially if you might be new to a certain type of format like APA, who just published their 7th edition of their format. So for someone like me who is writing a big paper, it's been incredibly helpful, and I cannot recommend it enough. When it comes to any other ideas, feel free to bounce these ideas off your friends. Maybe they use something different that might work better for you. We try to give an exhaustive list here, but there are so many resources out there that we can't name every single one of them. As for campus resources, as our campus is transitioned online for the remainder of the semester, make sure to look at this link for our health notice FAQs. It'll tell you everything about what's going on right now, how certain offices have transitioned online, and how you can utilize their resources. So feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have. So you can reach out to, successcoaching@wcupa.edu. If you'd like to chat about anything, we can set you up with a success coach or just clarify any information that I mentioned in this presentation. Please feel free to fill out our survey. We want to improve so that we can serve you better. So if you have watched this video, it'd be very nice if you can do that. So please do. And then if you have any further questions or you want to go about meeting with a success coach, such as myself or any of my other staff members, our schedule reaches throughout pretty much the entire week. There's about 15 of us. You can use this QR code to access the service called WC Online. If you do not have an account already, you can just go about registering for one. It's a really quick setup. You don't get any like spam emails or anything. The emails really only come from our session, so it'll be good to go about doing that. You can meet with us. We do online sessions right now, so it'll be similar to a kind of FaceTime session. So you can go about talking with us that way. There will be a little chat box if you find that things are going to be easier to type out. And just remember that we're here to serve you, so feel free to email us with any other questions that you might have. And thank you for watching this workshop.